I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes.
When I was a young teen, the early 80s was a real sort of era of discovery for me. I was sort of expanding outside of listening incessantly to the Ramones, which was my sort of first love, and the US hardcore scene was sort of pretty fertile for me. And one band that sort of kept coming up was the Minutemen, but for me, they were far, far away from that hardcore sound. You know, musically, they had elements of jazz, Beefheart, blues, country, and this sort of angular siding sort of post-punk played with this, sort of ferocious brevities. They had more in common with bands like Wire for me. They're impossible to pigeonhole, but pigeonholed they were, or they were tried to be. But lyrically, they were intelligent, satirical, political, but in many ways they felt much more progressive and relatable. The artwork, song titles, even the LP or EP titles, all added to this for me at that age, this sort of intrigue and anticipation of when a new record was going to come out. And a new record felt more like a kind of like a documentary of a time in their life, in a life that felt otherworldly to me, yet at the same time, to quote a lyric, our band could be your life. And I say all of this because my guest found, in his own words, guys you want to build dreams with and stuff. And he's lived a music life doing just that for me. And I'm really excited about, kind of exploring that, the importance of creating these sort of lasting human connections and collaborations and lots of other stuff. So there's really no other way to introduce my guest than to say that he's one of the most treasured contributors to arts and culture, and the guardian of that attitude that is punk rock. So Mike Watt, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Giles, thanks for having me aboard. Live from San Pedro, California.
Yeah, it's San Pedro, isn't it? Yes, absolutely. So I guess we've got. I mean, some like
we don't say tortilla, we don't say jalapenos.
No.
We do. Even the Latin guys say Pedro. I think it's a test, because if you say it the correct way, yeah, you ain't been here.
You're either a local or you've properly done your homework.
But actually, I'm from Virginia. I came here as a boy because my pop was a machinist.
Yeah.
But this is where my life gets changed, because this guy jumps out of a tree on me. He thinks I'm his next door neighbor.
Some guy jumps out of a tree, yes, and then everything was.
My life's changed. Completely.
Life's changed. I mean, that's really interesting about that. Almost like how those life-changing moments just, they just kind of happen, and you're not expecting them, and suddenly, bang!
I'm still living on the momentum. And we're talking 52 years ago. It was 52 years ago, and I'm still, running on the momentum of that.
Yeah.
Important dynamic sea change, huh?
Sort of looking back at that sort of time, or for at that event, because I was sort of think about my life, and sometimes the events that happened to me when I was a kid, and there are some things that really stay with you, and obviously for you meeting Dee, that was something that is. I'm guessing as obviously it's had a sort of massive impact, but also, just I guess kind of formed who you are.
Yeah, well, it was very personal. We used music to be together. The other intense thing was seeing the bags at the whiskey, and me, without thinking, out of my mouth, I looked at him. I said, "We can do this." There was something about the movement. The music for us was how we were together, right? Our first gig is T-Rex, and we're doing the Creedence and Blue Oyster Cult songs in the bedroom, kind of like building models. But when we saw people using music as expression, that was another huge sea change. And that's when probably meeting Black Flag and learning about touring.
Yeah.
Right? It's first to England.
I mean that's sort of interesting as well. About though again, another sort of formative sort of influence. kind of like outside of, sort of home life with parents or carers, and then your friends and those who you kind of gravitate towards just kind of naturally.
Yeah.
Like kind of outsiders, if you sort of feel it outside. It's really fascinating. I think it's fascinating how that kind of happens, and it's just like a natural thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of those connects last. Not just in the moment. The moment's very important, but it's trippy when you about connects until the fourth act, or you got to bow out, But even then, when you bow out, like D. Boon is still heavy on my life, even though he ain't talked to him all the time. He never answers me, but he wants me to think. But it's without being sentimental or nostalgic, using it as I don't know, propulsion for the new connection meet.
Yeah.
Like talking to you with right now. In a lot of ways, we're talking about things that we were, involved with very intensely in those days. And you were talking records as documents. That's the way I see them now. But in those days, we thought them as flyers.
Yeah.
The movement made us rethink the whole thing about music, that you could be a part, that there was something important about playing in front of people.
Yeah.
That coming up with songs as a means of expression was part of being part of the world of art, just like Raymond painting,
It's funny, isn't it? Like when I was, I mean, I'm 54 now, and when I was properly getting into music, as in sort of going to record stores and sort of buying stuff, it was probably around about 80, 81, stuff like that. And like we were saying just before we kind of started this, it was sort of bands like Killing Joke, Susie and the Banshees, early Adam and the Ants, that sort of first album, and it was always. It was like it was the package. It was going into the store, the Dart record store, and seeing that artwork, because you didn't know what the record sounded like.
Absolutely, no one wrote about it here. Well, there was Slash later on, and then flip side a little bit. But as far as the whatever proper rock and roll, Cream a little bit. But man, it was hard. So yeah, we would pick records by the album cover or the band name.
Yeah. Totally.
$2 for 7 inches, so it wasn't that expensive a dice roll just to check it out. Yeah, but there was a mystery in that and stuff. That whole scene, that whole thing. I mean, it was so much different than arena rock and the Nuremberg rally, and delivering the good time. Everybody's, it was way different. It was more like how I kind of felt at school, high school, junior high. Kind of like you said, outsider, and but there, or parallel universe. But then you in the movement, you found people like this. You could tell they didn't fit in with most of whatever Mersh stuff, but doesn't mean they were stupid. And better, they suffered from the disease of being curious, like myself. Yeah. So you could be together with somebody, but still have autonomy.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing about that movement. All those bands had their own sounds, but they were still on the same boat, trippy way. Because in the style of music, it was more like you were saying,
like a mindset.
Right. State of mind, yeah.
State of mind, yeah.
And so you let the style of the music up to the bands. And, there wasn't this kind of, because it wasn't run by people trying to get a shortcut with marketing. These Berlin Walls and gulags with genre names and this crap. Punk, we could not believe when we heard this word, because to Pedro here, it's a guy who gets fucked in jail for cigarettes, and like, this. But when we saw it, it was a trip. You could tell they were just learning how to play, but they were using music for a different thing than we were in a way. I mean, in some ways it was like the way we did it. It was very personal. This is a way you're with your friend. But the other side of it, instead of building models, trying to copy someone off a record, you were actually trying to make it expression. You're trying to find a place.
What was your sort of take on the on the UK scene that was happening?
I was going to say that we had two ways of being in the movement. One was going up to the whiskey and seeing the germs and X and dills, bags, screamers. You know, some of these bands didn't even have guitars. You know, it was not a genre thing. It was just people that were brave enough to let the freak fly. But then the other side of it, this guy in Long Beach is the other side of the harbor. Pedro's the west side, Long Beach, east side. And this guy, Mike Zed, and his mother had a record store called Zed of London. And what they did was import like the experimental hippie prog music, you know. And so when the movement came, they were all set up for these little labels. And then some weren't little labels like Polydor, CBS. I mean, Jam, Clyde. That's why only the first albums are good, because they just turn into regular rock and roll. But The Fall, Alternative Television, Lemon Kittens, pop group Wire, these bands never saw live, so we only knew them by their works, by their work. So it entered in a level of abstraction that was different than the whiskey, but it was in the same way kind of together. But this is why the Minutemen kind of, people say, well, you're a different kind of hardcore. Well, we thought the point was to be different. If you went to those gigs in the 70s in Hollywood, or if you listen to those records coming from England or wherever, you know, they put punk, even was from Lawndale, California, it'd be the import bin at Licorice Pizza, because that's the fuckers were, you know. But it was, you didn't know. Part of it was a surprise, like you got sandbagged by every dude's trip because it was so personal. And and you see cats doing that builds up confidence in you to try it. You know, maybe they won't know we're into Blue Oyster Cult and Creedence. You know, if we use the Wire format, and what better idea than putting Cat Beefheart with Parliament Funkadelic? You know, why not try this? So we're listening to this stuff, and then we're watching this stuff. But I gotta say, Giles, I think me and D Boon would have done music, you know, copying stuff in the bedroom, but we would not have been the Minutemen without the movement.
I'm interested what you said there about you know, kind of like having the confidence to do and sort of use those influences, you know, the, you know, kind of credences of Blue Oyster Cults, and bring and lots of others, and bring those into your sound, because that at that time the movement, and you'll know much better than me, but that movement was, you know, there was, it did become quite homogenous, you know, in its kind of sound, and you were very different. You were breaking out of that, like outsiders of outsiders almost.
Yeah. Well, when I look back on the movement, I really think it was an anti-arena rock thing. This one thing that informs this is 125 months with the Stooges, because they took, you know, I was finally the youngest guy in the band, and my ears were the size of elephants and like sponges. So I'd ask these guys billions of questions. There was an incredible club scene in the 60s, little labels, regional bands, garage bands. It got just steamrolled in the 70s by this arena rock movement, and the punk movement was a way. You know, there's this great song, this band up the city, Black Humor, did that. The chorus was, "The only thing new is you finding out about it," because that's what it was. This was the antidote. How many bands started in an arena gig, and how many bands started at a club gig where people were actually talking, where I could see Lorna Doom's bass. The bass actually had bigger strings. You know, the first 3-4 years I played a guitar with 4 strings, I didn't know they were bigger. I thought they had skinnier necks. It's all I saw pictures. These guys are so tiny at the gigs, and the sound, I didn't know bass meant lower. I was such a fucking idiot, you know. Slow learner. But these kind of situations, they add up to where you are now.
Yeah.
So
I think I
have those kind of ethics.
I think, you know, a lot of the time as well, you know, these kind of thoughts about, oh, what will, you know, can we do this? What will people think about it? It's all in your mind, and then you get up, and I guess if you have the right environment where you think, fuck it, I could just get up there and do it.
Yeah.
And you do it, and it's fine, isn't it?
Like Petri dish, right? Just
yeah.
yeah, but the other thing, so much was riding on it, right? You got so much to hire all these people, the event, so you have to go for this lowest common denominator, and it means more. You want last week's hit this week, and it's so jive. It's so against all the creative stuff that humans can do, because it's put in a different kind of context. It's some service and lifestyles, and we were trying to make our lifestyle service this kind of experiment, this laboratory. That's what it seemed like, laboratory. These people just took chances like crazy. I could see why the early skateboard scene plugged in. It's all about daring and stuff. You can't dare when so much, like with big movies, they can't take chances. They got so much riding on that shit. So what do we see in all these comic book, where the guys who made the content got what, $100 a page? Right? Olives at catering is more than what these guys, the guys who actually created the C word. This is what we got out of them gigs as performances, and the tunes too, but the records you could play over and over again. So the stuff we were getting on the records still was this big C word content, creativity, man, stuff. I didn't, even if it's some like, what was that guy who wrote the diaries and stuff? PC. There was this guy in England who wrote these diaries and stuff. And sometimes you're right, and that's where I see the document. But then some of it was totally. It wasn't about reality. It was trying to transcend reality, like cave paintings or something. Hey, what do you see there? Chromium oxide. No, that's a horse. Same thing with with a song like I don't know, 106 Beats That. It's like, what the fuck is this guy singing about? It don't matter. He believes in it, man. He's selling it. That was another thing, a link to an old tradition vaudeville.
Yeah.
You had to have people actually come to your town and play. But I got to say, the records are pretty incredible. I just look at one of them fall singles, How I Wrote Elastic Man. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How I Heard Elastic Man,
It's yeah. I mean, that was the, that, like you say, that sort of real era of daring, and I mean, that, how do you see it now? In terms of that daring and people being musicians, artists being willing to take risks. Do you see a difference now?
If you go to bandcamp.com, there's all kinds of whack music, wild stuff. One good thing, I stay from being, in a glass box, people marching around and paying admission, is I got this radio show for 21 years, the Watt from Pedro show. People send music. And in fact, during the situation, I was doing 5 shows a week, so it was almost 300 guests in 14 months. And a lot of cats were making music that was pretty, I was thinking of Throbbing Gristle right away. So it wasn't like a clone, some nostalgia thing. It was, no, they gave us permission to let the freak flag fly. Like John Cage or John Coltrane or Woody Guthrie, or talk about DIY, Walt Whitman, 1855, he puts out 12 poems himself. He thinks he can stop the U.S. Civil War. I mean, there is a tradition of this, but it's trippy how it took that movement in the late 70s to draw attention like this. I think it's a process that humans have always been using it. But you gotta also remember Pat Boone sold many Tutti Fruttis than Little Richard. So they asked Little Richard about that. He said, well, yeah, his version was for the living room. Mine was for the bedroom. And so same as it ever was, Mr. David Byrne. Or the pop group, right? We Are Time.
The pop group, with Mark,
Follow, No Fear of Tomorrow. I found I'm actually older than Mark Stewart by a year or two. I couldn't believe they were teenagers when they were doing that shit.
When they're doing that, yeah.
It's just beautiful. And I don't know. I still get excited about it. And one of the reasons is because those reverbs, resonations are still going through. And I hear, you could go to Bandcamp and hear a bunch of wild stuff still. Yeah. Big label productions.
It's interesting as well that the pop group's hometown, Bristol, that became, quite a, sort of like a big sort of music center, like over the years, with kind of bands like Massive Attack, then sort of doing their thing from there as well. And and obviously you've spent virtually all your time in Pedro.
Yeah.
How do you view the sorry?
If you call a tour more than a month, I've done 67 of those. So not all my time in Pedro.
But,
in fact, I just got done with one, 48 gigs in 48 days. It's 12,580 miles, and I drove every one of them.
Oh my God! Wow.
So it's not all Pedro, but the bungee cord always snaps me back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what does your sort of physical environment? How does that sort of help you in your collaborations, your creativity, or is it just?
It's like Bristol. It's a harbor. About being by the sea. The other thing is the weather.
Yeah.
Maybe it's me coming from Virginia. I remember, cardinals and crab apples. I also remember freezing winters and sweaty ass summers. It's just very calm for the weather here.
Yeah.
Also, Pedro, SoCal is actually 150 towns, and we're very balkanized. So we're kind of our own little village, even though there's no space between any of the. You fly over it, you think it's one city. No. So in a way, I can stay in Pedro. And I need some of that kind of stability because of all the touring. I got to be grounded. I know these people who live in this place for 2 years and this place for 3 years, 4 years. Those are brave motherfuckers. I would think it would take so much of my energy, I would have nothing left for music. So Pedro, in a way, is the charging station.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I like that. It becomes your almost like sort of safe haven. Once you've done the touring, you've done the physical exertion, the mental exertion. It's okay. Well, I'll come back. This is my stable ground.
Yeah. And this is one of the good things about the internet. You just don't have to use it for spread lies and hate. You can collaborate with people. I made like 10, 12 albums during the situation. Most of these cats I have never met yet.
Yeah.
Could still do music from Pedro, but it is, the physical thing. But man, to appreciate your Roman roost, right? When you sally, I'm thinking about home. But thinking about home, hey, I wonder how their homes are.
Yeah.
Get their conch pads, learn from them. I think life, this is why I've learned, Giles, life is about taking turns and also having a faith, sincere faith, that everybody's got something to show you or learn you.
How much have you relied on your gut instinct over your life? How much? What sort of role does that play for you?
Yeah, it does. Because there's something about getting consensus and stuff, but then there's something about, they say on the airplane, right? You put on your mask before you help the other. That's the way I feel about it a little. It doesn't supersede other things, but you got to know where you are. Or what did Sly Stone say? It's not where you're from, it's where you're at.
Where you're at, yeah.
Because you don't pick that other stuff. You can kind of pick the other stuff, maybe, if you're lucky. So that's why I think you got to put it in there, but you got to temper it. John Coltrane kind of teaches us the humility, practice. Check out, what would he say? Dig yourself. But I don't think it meant in a vain, conceited way. It just meant check out what you are and how much more you got to learn and how many more questions you got to ask other people to get that going.
Yeah, I remember that wonderful. I remember that wonderful story of Miles Davis, and I can't remember which film it was, but it was basically, I think it was a French writer. I think it was a French film, and Miles Davis and his band were asked to do the soundtrack for it. I wish I could remember the bloody name of it now. Oh, it'll come to me at sometime next year probably. But anyway, he was asked to do the soundtrack, and he was shown the film once. So and this was just Miles Davis, and he then went, once he'd seen the film, he went back to his bandmates and basically described the film. and they created the soundtrack from that description. And you think about it, you can,
it came through Miles's filter.
Yeah.
You know, when me and Raymond saw him at the Hollywood Bowl, and he had a keyboard on the side there, and he'd just go up and hit a chord. The whole band would just go to that next chord. And there's something about that. There's, you know, I got to play with work gigs with charismatic guys like Ig and Pear from Stooges and Pear from Porno for Pyro. And there's something about a cat like that. And where you let go, you trust them enough where you let go. But in a way, they're trusting you enough.
Yeah.
And so those musicians, I likened it to a boat. You know, there's a guy on the rudder, but then there's a guy at the bow. There's a guy at the keel. You know, you deck. All these parts come together, and it really ain't a hierarchy. It's more, that's why I really believe in this taking turns thing.
Yeah.
When you got static structures, then you know what? Yeah, we're conditioned like you really succeeded if you're the boss. But deep down, we all know if you're always the boss, there's going to be a lot of stuff you're never going to learn.
You're never going to learn. Yeah, this is actually sort of one thing that I've loved about what you've said over the years is that you're constantly learning. You know you sort of and it's sort of almost. I love that idea of just sort of constantly taking in things and learning. I mean, it's just a great thing and a great attribute to have, that just lust for knowledge and sort of learning.
Yeah. Well, you know, part of the politics of bass, you know, one big tenet is you look good making them look good. So how are you going to aid and abet? I mean, most people, when they go to the head, they probably look at the tile. I look at the grout. I look at the stuff in between the tile.
In between, yeah.
To be informed by the tile, to me, is a kind of a metaphor for being a student, being in the classroom. Why can't it be a classroom? And Buddha said, you know, stop teaching, stop living, right? Stop learning, stop living. This dynamic, it's almost like inhale, exhale. We like to think it ends at high school or college or something.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's interesting. If I think back to my parents, I mean, my dad died recently, so he was 92, and you know, their life was almost like this sort of 3-stage of, you know, you kind of get your education, you work, and then you retire, you know, and it's kind of quite linear. That's the way that it was, and almost you sometimes think that, but nowadays it's not. People are much more just sort of up and down, and you know, it's volatile, and it's ripe for, you know, for kind of learning, as long as you have that curiosity to keep learning.
Right. You know, humans, they're trendy species. They get into things, and if they could get into those nonlinear structures, I mean, that might work for some people, but for some people it don't. Or life might be different stages. Maybe that was a stage, and now you're doing this and this. Raymond Chandler, right? I think before a writer, it's an oil man or something.
Yeah. Well,
you know, life is a journey too. And maybe I picked this up from my pop being a sailor, but he was tripping out when, he didn't know why I was still playing after D. Boon was killed. He didn't know I was making a living at this. I went and got a degree in electronics for him, but I never used. I started sending him postcards because you're playing here and here and here. You know, his people was from Arkansas. I couldn't believe I was playing. I said, he goes, "You're kind of like a sailor," and that's where I got the idea for my first opera. There's something about meeting different people, the way people deal with life in their situations, that can learn you too, and maybe inform you on your decisions on what you're going to do, your gut instinct. There is this weird kind of trade-off between gut instinct and consensus and asking people their opinion. And the best way to ask opinion sometimes is just to watch, just observe. Yeah, and you can pick up on the stuff. It's like vocabulary. You don't really have to get rid of one word to learn a new one. You can make the vocabulary bigger. And this is the way I found with the bass and the music.
Yeah.
Now, went for a 5-string bass, but man, I got so much to learn with the 4-string. But there's so many different ways you could do the 4-string. You know, it's really, really interesting. And a lot of that has to do not with you playing bass alone, it's you playing with other people. So this kind of dynamic I have with bass and other musicians is kind of the way I look at it with musicians. Now, like you're talking with your parents, sort of like, you know, people that are kind of open and maybe square johns. A lot of the time, the square johns, they think that was the only way. See, and that movement showed us there was like, you know, we thought the arena rock way was the way. We didn't know about club or, you know, little petri dishes, own thing and that stuff. If you don't know, how can you ever choose it?
It's true. Yeah, that's very true. So that you know, those sort of movements and those, you know, kind of coming together of people. And if I think about the you know, the other sort of musical movements, you know, sort of since punk. So I don't know, talk about like acid house, for example, you know, as a kind of movement of people, you know, when you know, economically times were difficult and, you know, people were pissed off and things like that. And that was that sort of movement, but it brought people together and it encouraged people to go and do things.
Yeah. And then also cross-pollinate the other arts. I think Banksy is a Bristol guy.
You're right. Yeah.
And but you know what? I could see some crass in his thing.
You can, yeah. The sort of the stencil sort of art. Yeah.
You know, things inform each other. You know, it's like a good plaid, huh? Good plaid. All the threads come together. You know, and you know, everybody's got their own taste. I love a little bit of white because if the club's got a black light on, whoa, you look like Madonna, you know. But you know, I got into flannels because I couldn't hear the bass on them Creedence records, so I looked at the singers' shirts, you know, and I was thinking, well, Mark Bolan's got a boa. That's this guy's rock and roll shirt. So maybe if I wear these shirts, D Boon will still like me because I cannot hear this bass. Arts operate on such trippy levels, and I think a lot of them are happening at the same time. Yeah, they only get linear when somebody's trying to make big bucks off it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned Crass. I mean, Crass, you know, still, you know, we're talking what again, like 45 years, like still hugely influential.
Yeah.
And there's I mean, in the UK, there's a band that I really like called Benefits. They're from Middlesbrough. It's up in the northeast of England. And there's a natural thing about comparing, isn't there? That we sort of look back. Okay, who can we compare this band to? And I
at gigs,
yeah,
I could not watch a band without my mind automatically bringing in. And I think this kind of came from nothing to get. I love Richard Meltzer and stuff, but the rock right actually he had fun with this kind of shit. But the idea, if you want to talk about something, you got to talk about other things connected to it. But it made the experience of seeing a band really trippy because you couldn't just take them at their own worth. You had to automatically bring in this and this and this.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like we I don't know. It's like kind of humans. We our brains are sort of wired to put things in boxes because that means there's some sort of order, and we can then.
I know, but I think we transcend. For example, you can write a novel and not invent one word. Use every word that everybody else used and still have an original novel. That's the trick.
That's true. That's a good point.
That's the trick. You use stuff that everybody's using, but you make a voice, you give it a life. You know, so you end up with a Ulysses. You're trying to talk about the whole world. It's actually one day and a guy and his wife. You're trying to talk about everything. And I'd like to check out the Benefits. They're called Benefits.
Benefits, yeah. It's very minimal, and it's very political. They're very political in their in the kind of statements that they're making. But they're kind of
Sleaford mods.
Yeah. Sleaford. Well, actually, on this podcast, Andrew he was on one of the earlier episodes, and he was really actually. It's really interesting you mentioned that, because Andrew, you know, one of the things that inspired him to start music, and he started, you know, kind of playing around with with keyboards in his bedroom when he was at school. And I think he's what age is he? He's about 52 now, I think. And he said that it was punk that inspired it for him to do it. He said, I couldn't play. I didn't know what to do with any keyboards. He said, but, you know, I looked at the punk ethos and I thought, well, I can do that.
Yeah,
it's kind of what he did.
That's happening. And they've got their own voice. You hear a couple notes, Slayford Mods, you know right away. It's them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's victory. That is a real victory. And definitely the other man has a point of view with
his, for sure. Yeah, with Jason, yeah.
Rhythm with Andrew's music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is it. Yeah, this is you know, I think kind of like where real, you know, sort of musicians come in, you know, with their instruments and making their own kind of rhythm within the, you know, the entire sort of song, you know, whether it's sort of, you know, drumming. You know, I was talking to actually sort of yesterday to Sam from Interpol about his drumming style, you know, and again, you know, that kind of like rhythm, that sort of swing that you get, and the same with your, you know, with your bass playing as well. You know, it's the rhythm, and it's the tune within the song.
Yeah. Something about, I mean, it's all rhythm actually, especially rock and roll and stuff. And this idea of putting the drummer in the back of this, you know, last 20 years, this is a big mistake Minutemen made. George Hurley should have been right at the front of the stage.
Phenomenal drummer, right?
Last 20 years, I've always had my drummers at the front of the stage.
Yeah.
Why denial? And I think maybe the first instrument, now some people say it was beating on the chest, but I think it might have been stamping on the ground, because not is it a drum, but it's also dancing.
Yeah.
And I think dancing has something really, you know, connected with music.
Have you seen the OCs play? You know,
they opened up for the Stooges at the last gig I did with.
So John always has his two drummers out front. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like it kind of feels then when you have that, it feels like, okay, this is a complete democracy of a band.
Yeah, the drummer in the back, so much hierarchy in that, man, so much. And for what, you know, because he's got damaged history with arena rock. It's just almost everything I do is anti that, even though I ended up doing festivals and shit. Yeah, you know, I just last week in Daytona Beach with the Porno for Power, there was 40,000 people. And this is the stuff I got into the music movement to be against. But the way I looked at it was, I'm playing right here with Pear. Almost I was doing the gig with Pear. And he was right in front of me dancing and singing. It was almost like, yeah, it wasn't like, it was like we were kind of removed and put in this other, like some kind of ride at Disneyland or something, because it was so divorced from, they were so little out there. I couldn't, and I didn't want to get distracted anyway, but this man up here fucking singing his heart out and dancing for you. I mean, talk about being in the moment. I mean, it's just, there's something about it. There's just something about it. Somebody who really takes it serious. Like, you know, John, not angry, I'm serious, John Coltrane said. And serious doesn't mean not happy. It means I mean it.
I mean it. I'm serious about it. I mean, what sort of, you know, the different, you know, kind of emotions or sort of, you know, feelings do you get when you're playing, you know, that sort of show, you know, that sort of arena show compared to actually, and we'll talk about this, you know, with you coming up with your tour, coming up with Flipper, you know, sort of smaller venues.
Yeah, which is where I come from, and which really turned things around. You know, besides meeting D. Boon, that was the next sea change, was seeing a club gig. It was just a mind blow. I could not believe it. But I almost have to put that experience on the stage. You know, a lot of those stages at arena shows are bigger than clubs. It's just the stage.
True.
So
Yeah,
that's
it's just
I make it where I'm playing with the guys, the other musicians. I make it like they're part of the gig audience, and I don't really react with the crowd and stuff like that. I do feel huge responsibility of playing the best I can for people because, man, gigs cost a lot of money. They work all week. You're going to come up, just take, you know, wear it on your shirt sleeve, you know. So I'm very serious about playing the best I can, but I got to aid and abet. I got to be part of this thing. So I got to get whooped up, kind of a dervish thing, you know, those Sufi cats when they get spinning. But at the same time, you don't have it together. So you don't let the drummer down. You don't let the band down. You don't let the singer down. So many singers listen to the bass. Oh, my God. I remember we'd have the debriefings after the gig. Mike, I'm going to call you on that third to the last note in that second part. Sorry. But so I feel real responsibility to the audience and your band. But at the same time, there does have to be like this dervish moment. You got to whoop yourself into that. And to do that, I got to almost make it like it's a club. Because a club can do that because it's a pressure cooker. It's a small, fine thing, you know. And when it's gig goers, I mean, they are part of the gig in a club thing. Those outdoor festivals, those arena rock things, they're hardly part of the gig for me. Clubs, they are totally part of the gig. Yeah, because they have to. Everything's too compressed.
Well, I think you only have to sort of look at the, you know, so many you know, people who go to watch those sort of gigs when they get, you know, a sort of big band who normally play the, you know, the big venues, and then they do a you know, a kind of warm up, for example, you know, so they play a warm up at a sort of small show. You only have to see the reaction of like when the tickets go on sale or when the reaction after that gig. It's like, right, that was and the people are like, fuck, this was like a once in a lifetime opportunity to see the band sort of so close up. So you know, you have that love of those sort of small ones, and the fan, even fans that watch the big gigs, they have that as well when they see them like in that sort of proximity.
Yeah. I mean, the connect, there's nothing like it.
Nothing like it.
Nothing like it. And I didn't grow up with it. I didn't know it, you know. You know, I went and saw the Bags. You know, and the Stooges were playing in the early 70s up at the Whiskey and stuff. I just didn't know. All I knew, I thought it was only arena rock. You know, if you don't know, and how do you choose? People say, oh, freedom of choice. Well, yeah, but if you don't know all the choices, how can you choose? There's no options in those days. So like you said, I think the Rolling Stones will do stuff like that. They'll start off with a club gig. And that's where they come from, you know, that's where they learn, that's where they got their sound, that's where they got the way of working a gig, working a room.
Yeah.
Working a room and working an arena rock room. I mean, it ends up being a Nuremberg rally, you know. Yeah, it's just these big broad gestures, and you know, it's
kind of people sort of watching you on a big screen to the sort of the side of the stage.
I know. I mean, like I said, it's kind of in another realm. It's not such a art form interconnection between a gig goer and a gig doer. Yeah. It's more like, it could be socks, it could be, you know, blenders. It's a way of marketing something, you know, and I understand that part of life.
Yeah.
But don't get me that excited. It's like working a little room. But I work any room. The way I do it with the big gigs is I concentrate on the dudes I'm playing with on the stage.
So you're playing with,
that's do it. And,
I remember actually, I saw you play at the Lexington in London.
I love that.
Yeah, about sort of, we're talking about 6 years ago, 7 years, might be even longer than that.
But Sonia de Mainai, the Italian
That's
guys?
the one. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's the one.
I think upstairs is the quietest.
Yes, that's the one.
Good.
But I could tell that you were solely. It was about the guys on stage.
Oh yeah,
you know, even though the crowd's sort of right up in your face, it's about the guys on stage.
It's really good. There's good sight lines. Everybody's involved. It's a good room. Yeah. It's hard to schlep up the stairs with the gear, but it is good. it's a good thing. But yeah, I'm very concerned with the guy because I got into music to be with my friend, and so it's always going to be a personal thing with me. I don't think I was an entertainer. I got into music to be with people. Bass player, the role in the music, you got to really bring the thing together. You're this mysterious thing still. And I hope bass does stay kind of mysterious. But and then sometimes, I also come from tradition of opening for Black Flag, opening for Primus, for Beastie Boys, where the audiences are throwing shit at you, spitting at you. I very, very negative reactions. Oh, getting used condoms thrown at me, cups of piss, bags of shit. Batteries hurt. Okay, fuck. I had to build up this kind of thing where you couldn't care about the audience in a way because they're going to ruin the show, and it might not be all the audience. Opening up for REM, you're only there because the band wants you. None of the audience wants you there.
Yeah, so that's true.
But years later, I had guys come up to me. I saw you 25 years ago, and I called you assholes, and I was an asshole. Now that I think about it, and you just don't know. So these kind of experiences inform me. So I did get into going with my guys, but I have got the club thing is a little braver to interact with the audience people. Yeah, because they're really there. They're almost like band members. They're almost like band members.
How are you approaching your collaborations now? Because obviously, over the years you've done tons of collaborations.
There's different ways. Obviously, like helping the Stooges, you're taking direction. I'm not telling you to change any notes. And other times, like with my operas, usually if I say Mike Watt, the Missing Men, I want you to know who to blame. So I'm giving the direction. So I'm going to tell the story. Raoul Tom, will you help me? Pete Jared, will you help me with the second opera? Then another way is like with D. Boon, where you don't have to ever teach the guy something. You just play, and he comes up with a part because you grew up together. The only guy close to that is kind of Nels Klein. I could just play for that man, and he'll come up with something in the moment. And there's the strange way, new way for me is with this MSSV band with Mike Baguetta. I've never had. Usually, if I'm helping another band, I take the place of the dead guy, right? And I learn his parts. He actually writes me bass parts. I've never had anybody write me bass parts. And then from that, he writes his guitar and drum parts. So that's another way of doing it. Then there's the thing like with the Italian guys. 3 guys, so 1/3 of the materials from each guy. Here's my composizione.
Yeah.
Fratello. Bring what you got. And so those are the different ways. And I like to mix that up too. And then because of the situation with the internet, a lot of I got really kind of interested in this, what they call it, free music, improvisational stuff you don't practice.
Yeah.
So they're not here in the room with me, but I would have them give me music, and then I just go for it, like they were there in the and improvise. So there's that kind of collaboration too.
Yeah, got you. Yeah.
Called jam in the old days or something. But it's it's trying to get a dialogue going where you got to actually trade monologues.
Yeah.
But sure, at the end of the day, do they know? Remember Frank Morgan in Wizard of Oz? Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. He was the man behind the curtain. It's trippy about music. It's kind of like with chow, food, right? You don't know if it tastes good, you like it.
Yeah, that's true.
No, like sausage, right? What the fuck's in that? Asshole. Okay.
So I guess the next thing that's coming up is the Flipper, the Flipper UK and Europe tour.
Now, Minutemen opened for Flipper Black Flag 41 years ago.
Wow.
25th, 1981, San Francisco, up in the city, 10th Street, all this thing. And who would think 41 years later, I would be, and they want to do it as a trio. So this is kind of a new version of a Flipper. And I think it's a huge challenge, but I love their music, and I love the guys.
Yeah.
Steve. Yeah, good cats, man, and it helps. I think people who know me, it helps get another perspective on Watt. For Watt, it gets me to be in a very interesting situation where I am going to interpret these works, because if you think about Flipper songs, of course, a lot of drums, a lot of guitar, but the bass lines too. Interesting. In
Absolutely.
fact, it would trade off, right? Will and Bruce, and so I really look forward to it. Incredible. And then the 2019, so 3 years ago, I did it with them in Europe, and people I think enjoyed. Yeah, when you give people things like this, you're not trying to create a brand.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just this one kind of thing. I'm just this one sound. I'm just no. It's like maybe you look at a pocket knife. Where's the art in the pocket knife? Is it in just that knife, or is it what's going to be carved with it? And I think that's what this Flipper thing, it adds. That's more the dimension I want to show people.
Yeah.
Not look at this knife. In fact, there's so much gear fetish. This is one weird thing about music that I wouldn't dig about these days. A little too much fetish. If all I need is the right stuff, and I'll come up with the right thing.
Yeah.
This is a human materialist problem always. Whereas we're talking about a movement where people were using whatever they
could get their hands on.
Yeah, we Jamicano was not a slogan; it was a fucking way of life. and so that's why I want people to see, like, whoa, look how Watt is putting the bass in there. Look what he is in context of Flipper songs, Flipper music, playing with Brother Ted, Steve, and here in this moment, 41 years after he got to share a stage with them.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting, isn't it? Because you've got the band, as a lot of people will remember them. Those that do remember them. You got probably sort of newcomers who have listened to some of their stuff, never seen them live, and then you're putting almost like a kind of like a new evolution of them. Let's see how it sounds like this. With Watt's take on it.
I also think it gives, because there's a danger in revisionism. Or I remember when Nirvana came out, and so and like you said, our band could be Michael Azerrad wrote that book because it was Sex, so Nirvana, nothing in between. So I think people see something like this, the movement, punk. It was a bunch of different things. Why couldn't the Minutemen bass player play in Flipper?
Yeah,
they were actually part of the same dealio, but different accents, different slang, different beats. I remember people were getting on Flipper for playing too slow. Like, what is that?
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Even Minutemen, we were playing, we were those kids, they wanted to dance, and it changed from pogo up and down to slam left and right. So we got caught up in playing faster and faster too, but they're all devised to help you express your fucking voice, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to get over that because we latch onto these kind of, I don't know, totems, fetishes, and they're identifiers, right? They're signifiers, semiotic kind of things that, I'm with you, where it couldn't be more broader sense, like, it's still there. It's all right. This is just their way. We can learn from this. And maybe so much I've learned from all my fellow punk musicians through the thing. Also, even more square stuff,
Yeah.
Like Madonna or something, I think you got to get beyond that petty shit, And so I think in a way we're helping bringing a wrecking ball to some of that fucking really stiff ass revisionism.
Yeah.
Same thing with right wing spiel with the Vietnam War over here and stuff, redefining the stuff for their own purposes. So if you have people that were actually from there and trying to, tunes can be timeless. So in a way, you do them in this way, you bring them back and you kind of let people define it for themselves and make sense of it for themselves. That's what I think. That's what my is.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. That's a great way to look at it. Mike, thank you so much for your time.
You asked me great stuff, Giles. I can't thank you enough.
Oh no, it's been amazing. It's been amazing listening to you, and I'm gonna come and see you because I've got to be in Liverpool on the 29th of July, but the 28th I think you're playing in Salford near Manchester.
That's the first one.
That's the first one, so I'm gonna come to that one. I'm gonna be able to get up for that one. So that'll be
always the pants shitter gigs.
The first one. Oh, you're not coming to the first one, oh.
That's all right, because you can only have the first one once.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show, and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.